Welcome to another 21 Hats Dashboard. I'm Lauren Feldman, and I'm here with Eric Stites, who is CEO of Franchise Business Review, which helps people who are interested in buying franchises assess the many opportunities that are out there. Welcome, Eric.
Thanks, Lauren. Glad to be here.
It's great to have you here. Tell me a little bit how Franchise Business Review works. What's kind of your methodology for assessing the opportunities that are out there?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we've been doing this 20 years, and the best way I can explain it is we're kind of like the consumer reports of the franchise world. And so what that means is we actually survey individual franchise owners, the franchisees, and ask them questions about their franchisor and their satisfaction with the business. And so ratings and reviews of many things. It's basically ratings and reviews of franchise companies based on owner satisfaction. And like I said, we've been doing this 20 years, and we survey 30 to 40,000 franchisees every year, and publish the lists of the top franchises out there based on that owner satisfaction.
So obviously those ratings help anybody who's looking to assess the various franchises that they might consider buying. Do you also work with franchisors to help them? What do you do for them?
Yeah. So basically, any company, any franchisor can participate in our research at no cost. I mean, we want it to be independent and open to anyone. Most of the companies that do, though, buy the survey results from us so they can understand how they're doing supporting their franchise owners and how they can get better. And so, it's a great operational tool for a franchisor first to, again, understand how they can get better at their training and their support and their marketing that they're providing to their franchisees. Obviously, they get a lot of feedback from their franchisees as part of the survey process as well. So a lot of ideas and improvements can come out of that feedback. And then, on the I guess development side of things, if they do have good satisfaction with their owners, it's a great tool to help prospective franchisees, get a better understanding of how franchisees feel about the franchisor and kind of that validating the brand. And so not unlike Amazon reviews or Google reviews or anything else, Franchise Business Review is the review authority of franchises. And I think there's really nothing more important to think about when you're getting into a franchise brand is, what do the existing franchisees have to say about their franchisor, and so it's really it's really a great tool for that.
How did you get into the business? I guess I'm kind of curious whether you saw the gap, the problem, the gap between franchisees and franchisors, and thought there might be a way to address it.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, 20 years ago, when I started, I was working for a franchise marketing company that was helping franchise companies generate, leads for, people that wanted to open their franchise. And one of the brands I was working with at the time, it was actually Dunkin' Donuts. They had great interest in from people that wanted to open their franchises. But they were having trouble with their franchisees returning phone calls and kind of validating the brand for them. And they had great validation, but as any business owner, franchise business owners are very busy, and so the average franchisee in a system like Dunkin', might get dozens of calls each week from people that are thinking about or dreaming about opening a Dunkin' franchise. And so, we kind of put our heads together and we were like, everybody wants to know the same things. Is the training good? Is the support good? Is the marketing good? Are you making any money? And so why don't we just survey those owners and share that data with candidates? And so that was kind of the light bulb moment. And then we quickly realized that it needed to be, independent third party. Like, it couldn't be something that the brand did internally in order for candidates to believe it. So, long story short, I, I quit my job and hung out the Franchise Business Review shingle, and been doing this 20 plus years now.
Good for you. When I was a Cub reporter, one of my first jobs as a business reporter was at the Columbus Dispatch in Ohio. And I just, in looking for things to cover, I just realized that Columbus was kind of a hotbed for fast food franchises. And I hadn't really appreciated this previously, but it was because Wendy's came out of there and did really well and made a bunch of people, investors, a lot of money. And for a while after that, anybody with any cockamamie idea could raise money for a fast food franchise in Columbus. Right. I'm just curious. That's the only situation like that I've been aware of. It was really fascinating to me, especially following the crazy ideas that didn't work out. But is that something that comes and goes in the industry? Have you seen other examples of bubbles and, hot streaks and things like that?
Yeah, for sure. And it's common. There are kind of these hotbeds of franchising headquarters around the United States, towns like Minneapolis and Atlanta, Denver for sure. And it's people jumping from one concept and starting a new concept. And Minneapolis was big in hair cutting. Regis, which is one of the biggest hair cutting companies in the world, is based there, and that spawned a number of other brands. And that's true in the fast food industry. It's true in many different industries. And I get the question a lot is like, Eric, what's hot in franchising today?
That's my next question, Eric.
Yeah. What's the hot new concept? And my gut is always, kind of like, do you really want to invest in what's hot? Because what's hot is probably really trendy as well. And so you might have a good, couple year run, but, I tend to be more attracted to those industries that are kind of steady and recession resistant and proven over decades that they work. And so, certainly there's lots of new concepts every day popping up in the food sector. Lots of people obviously think about food and franchising kind of hand in hand. But what they don't realize is how many different sectors really there are out there in the franchise world. Is if you think about any type of business, whether it's, I know you've got several business owners on your podcast, and from picture framing to construction to real estate, all those industries also have franchise companies operating as well. And so I think that's the biggest thing that people find out when they start looking at franchising, is that there's so many different types of opportunities beyond just food. And again, I like to, focus in on, those brands that have been around for a while and have a proven track record. And, it's a service that's, going to be here 5 years, 10 years down the road.
So I hear your caveat, and that investing what's hot may not be the best strategy, but I'm still kind of curious. What is hot right now?
Yeah. Well, again, like I said, food is, there's lots of new concepts popping up in food. And when you think about kind of like the fresh alternatives, to, I think Chipotle kind of started that, and Chipotle's not franchising, they're corporate owned, but lots of concepts have kind of popped up following that type of model. Dave's Hot Chicken, you may be familiar with,
Sure.
That popped up out of Los Angeles a few years ago and just exploded. And recently sold, I think, for $1 billion.
I think I read that.
Yeah, grew very quickly. I mean, a few years back, frozen yogurt was a huge. There, every corner in every city in America had yogurt shops popping up left and right.
That was like 10 or 15 years ago, wasn't it?
Yeah, and and unfortunately, a lot of those are gone, and so. Fitness is another industry that tends to be very, very trendy. And so like there's different types of fitness categories or fitness concepts popping up here and there, and but some stand the test of time. When you think of like Gold Gym is still around, Planet Fitness has been around for several decades, and so I think that's generally what I tell people is like yeah, hot might be good, but I like the steadier more uh, more recurring businesses that have been around. I mean, certainly another industry which a lot of people don't realize is franchised is home care, senior care, and that's been booming for over the last decade, obviously because of the aging population. And so, that I would say that's a very hot industry and potentially very lucrative as well.
Do some of these chains manage to succeed even when things cool off? For example, are there frozen yogurt chains doing well right now?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it really varies, excuse me, from market to market, and so I think and that's where a lot of franchise companies often get into trouble. Is they start in their home market and kind of expand from there, and they've got a very secure footing in that market, and can do well, regardless of what may be going on in the economy. But then a lot of times they'll go to grow, and instead of just expanding regionally, they'll jump maybe from the East Coast to the West Coast, or from the north down to the south, and they end up with a bunch of units or locations spread out all over the place, and that gets complicated, both from an operations and support perspective, but also just from a branding and marketing standpoint. When you have that kind of more saturated exposure in a single market, it's good for all the franchise owners, versus having one person here in California and one person here in Massachusetts and another down in Florida, and it's a lot. It kind of spreads things out too thin.
I'm sure you get asked this question all the time. I'm not sure if you can answer it, but I'm going to try.
Sure.
How much money can someone make in franchising? Is it possible to answer that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I just gave a talk this weekend out in Los Angeles at the Franchise Expo there on this exact topic. And my first slide answers the question.
Really?
It's $142,000. Yeah, so
that's a very definitive answer.
Yeah, it's kind of a joke, but it is based on data. So as I said, we research tens of thousands of franchisees every year. One of the questions we ask them is, what is their pre-tax income? So that 142,000 is kind of an average of all the franchisees that we survey.
And do you think, is that salary? Is it salary plus profit? What does that represent?
So it's basically any money and or profit that they take out of the business. So
got it.
Yeah, and small business owners pay themselves in different ways. Some take a salary, some just take a draw, some, obviously take it more out in profit. And so basically it's the amount of money, whether it's salary, or bonus or draw or whatever they take out of the business as their pre-tax income. The reason I guess that number's not all that useful is it's an average of all the franchise owners that we survey. And so, we survey single unit people, we survey, people that own 10, 20, 30 locations of some brand. It's people that have been in business for 20 plus years, as well as people that are just getting started. And so, it's really all over the map, as far as, the industry and how long you've been at it and that sort of thing. And so while it's a starting point, I definitely don't want to give your listeners the idea that you can buy a franchise and start making $142,000 next year. In some systems that may be true, but for the vast majority, it will take you time to get there.
For somebody who is just getting started and thinks this is a something they would enjoy doing, something they would be good at. Can you guess at what a reasonable expectation would be for that kind of person? Just starting with
Yeah.
one purchase?
I mean, the advice I give people is, again, it's hard to generalize because every industry is so different.
Sure.
If you think of the service industry, when you open up for business, you have to go out and start getting customers. And so it takes you a lot of time to kind of build up that clientele. Versus like in the food industry, oftentimes when they have a grand opening, their business, they open the doors for the first day and their business comes flowing in and they have sometimes their highest sales at grand opening. So it really varies depending on the brand and the industry that you're looking at. The thing that I also, one of the other things people often ask me is like, somebody's coming out of corporate America and they're like, Eric, I make, 200 grand, a year. I need a franchise that I can make 200 grand out of the gate. And those types of opportunities are very, very few and far between. The exception, I guess, is, if you have a lot of capital and you can open multiple locations very quickly, then that's kind of a different scenario.
Sure.
But, for the average person that's looking to open a franchise business, say a service business, whether it's senior care or pet services or child services, whatever, I generally say as a good rule of thumb, like don't plan on, paying yourself or taking any money out, at least for the first 6 months, if not, year. You're going to want to put that money back in the business and reinvest it in the business. Now, having said that, that's not always realistic for everyone. They have to pay their living expenses. And so, certainly the ideal situation is if you're, have a spouse or a partner, and you can live on one salary while the business is getting up and running. That's a great opportunity. It may require you, if you're not in that situation, you may be required to take a larger loan to kind of cover some of your living expenses as well. But yeah, I tend to tell people, don't expect to take money out of the business for a good period of time. And that's a great opportunity too, when you're doing homework on different franchise concepts, is talk to other franchisees in that brand and ask them, what their experience was as far as how quickly the business ramped up and when they were able to take some cash out.
Can you give any guidance on when you believe it makes sense to buy a franchise versus starting your own business?
Yeah, it's a great question. Because I'm very pro franchising, but it's not for everyone for sure. And so franchising is kind of the cliche and kind of the saying around the industry is it's being in business for yourself, but not by yourself. So certainly it comes with,
or if you want to put it even more in slightly demeaning terms, it's sometimes referred to as people buying a job.
Yes. I mean, in some cases, but I don't think that's really a fair assessment.
That's what I wanted to hear.
Yeah. So, it's basically a business with guardrails. So, at the end of the day, in a franchise system, you own the business. The franchisor is licensing you their brand and their operating procedures and all of that, but you own the business at the end of the day. Any employees that you have, they work for you. They don't work for corporate. And ultimately, you're building an asset just like any other business owner that you'll be able to hopefully sell for a profit, down the road. And so, again, it's based on that relationship with the franchisor. So, when you go to sell your franchise, the franchise brand has to approve the new person that's buying that business, but you still can sell it and sell it for a profit. And so it's just, the type of person that's a little bit more entrepreneurial and kind of likes to do their own thing and isn't so good at, maybe following directions. I mean, those types of people.
That's true of a lot of entrepreneurs.
Yeah, yeah, they tend to not be great franchise owners just because they're trying to reinvent things and not just follow the system. Um, and the best franchise owners are those that are creative, certainly, but they're smart enough to understand, hey, there's an operating plan here and a playbook here, and I just need to follow the system and do what everybody else is doing. And that's really, aside from obviously the brand name and the marketing and all the support that you get in a franchise, having access to that network of other franchise owners is huge, because you can pick up the phone and call anybody in your network that's operating the exact same business, and you can compare financials and you can talk about challenges, again, not just like you do with all the people on your podcast, but these people are operating the exact same business. So when they're comparing food costs or employee costs or insurance things, all those things are kind of more apples to apples within a franchise brand. The other analogy, or not an example really, that I like to talk about is in COVID. When you think about the impact that had on many small business owners and how many small business owners had to scramble and pivot to figure out, how to survive. Many franchise brands thrived during COVID. And again, think about it. You've got the support of a large brand behind you, a lot of experienced operators out there. They were much faster at pivoting and kind of doing that research and figuring out curbside delivery or delivery at home or whatever it was to get through COVID, as well as like even navigating the PPP loans that the government was getting out. A lot of those went to franchise companies first because they were the first ones to kind of figure out how to get that for their franchise owners. So
That's interesting.
It's great to have that corporate support behind you. But again, you want to make sure that, not every franchise is created equal, for sure. And so you want to make sure that you talk to many franchisees and ask them, what their experience has been with the franchise brand that you're thinking about.
Do you believe that franchise owners are in fact entrepreneurs?
I do. And I'm sure people debate this, but I think it definitely takes. When I think about entrepreneurship, I think about a couple of different things. I mean, certainly risk is a part of that, and not
A
being
big part.
Yeah, not being afraid to take a risk. But betting on yourself and certainly owning a franchise business comes with a big risk, and you're betting on yourself. It's you're not starting the company from scratch, so I'm sure there's true entrepreneurs out there that built their company from scratch that would be like, oh no, franchising's not that's not entrepreneurship. But I disagree. I mean, I think that a lot of franchisees are very entrepreneurial. And I mean, and the stories are amazing. I mean, I met a guy a few years back that came to the U.S. as an immigrant, started working in one of the fast food chains as a dishwasher, and then ultimately worked his way up to general manager of that location, and then the owner of that location helped him buy that location when he was ready to retire. And that gentleman went on to own hundreds of fast food franchises. And so great success story. Again, I don't want to just talk about fast food because there's so many other opportunities out there, but franchising it is a great opportunity for folks that want to own a business, but don't necessarily either have the idea or the energy to start one from scratch.
Over the years, I've bumped into a handful of franchise chains that had a policy that they would not sell a franchise to anyone who hadn't worked as an employee in the company, in the one of the franchises.
Yeah.
Is that something that is catching on, or has caught on, or is widespread, or is that still pretty rare?
Yeah, I mean, I say it's fairly rare, but I mean, certainly it is encouraged. I mean, most brands do require you as a new franchisee. So, once you become a franchisee as part of training, you'll often go and work for one of their franchise locations. It might just be for a week or two. It's not necessarily being an employee for a long time. Certainly, when I tell people when they're doing their homework on various brands, I tell them if they can have an opportunity to go shadow a couple of franchisees, either in their local market or nearby local market, that's certainly a great opportunity to kind of understand the ins and outs of the business and what it's like to actually run the business. Because the important thing, aside from owner satisfaction and the investment and the financials and all of that stuff, I mean, you need to find a business that you're passionate about and excited about. Because at the end of the day, like if you're not excited about this business and doing whatever it is you need to do to be successful, like you won't make it. And so it's important to really understand, within a specific franchise brand, what are their top performers doing on a day-to-day basis? Because it's often very different than the product or the service that they may be providing. I mean, I think fast food in that case is a great example. It's not, the franchise owner's not preparing the food and all of that. I mean, they're managing a great team that does all of that. And there's a lot of people management and operational management to make that happen. Other businesses, you as the owner are going out and, like I said, building a clientele in your local community. So it's a lot of sales and marketing and networking. Going to better business meet or chamber of commerce meetings and other business meetings and nights and weekends and that sort of thing to kind of build out your business in your local community. But that might not be a great fit for somebody that doesn't like talking to people and networking and sales.
Sure.
You might want to then look at business that's a little bit more focused on an operator or operations. And and the other thing in the franchise business is you can always hire for the skills that you're not necessarily the best at, but you just have to keep in mind that obviously the more you hire, the more money that's going out the door to support those employees. And, that kind of reduces what will be left over for take home at the end of the day for you as the business owner.
What's the least amount of money you might need to get started with a franchise? For the price, the fee, the initial fee, cash on hand.
Yeah. No, it's a great question. I mean, there are franchises out there. There's a couple of brands that we do a lot of work with that are in the travel industry, and the initial investment is under $10,000. And you're basically a travel agent selling vacations and cruises and that sort of thing. And it's a work from home concept or work from anywhere concept. You if you've got a computer and and a phone, you can do that business. And so, there's lots of low cost. We define low cost as investments under $100,000. But there's lots that are well below that in the $25,000, $35,000, $50,000 range. And I think the other important piece to keep in mind too is there's the total cost of the business, but that doesn't necessarily mean you need to write a check for that full amount day one. Again, because of you might get a loan and finance some of that, or maybe you have some savings that you can use to get into that. But if you think about it, it's very similar to buying a house, right? So if you buy $500,000 home, you're not writing a check for $500,000. You're financing it over time, and in many cases, businesses are financed. They might put 25, 30% down but then finance the rest over time. And again, it's all over the map from industry to industry and what those requirements are. Um, it's just a great opportunity to again talk to franchisees and find out what their experience was. And because as you know, and all your listeners know, is the worst thing you can do is be undercapitalized when you go into a business. And it might be a great business, but if you don't have enough money to keep it running, it will fail ultimately. So that's the worst case scenario. And we certainly coach people to say, make a plan A and a plan B, and then also have a backup plan to, get additional capital if you need it. Because, when you're running low on capital and you've already spent $100,000 on a new business, oftentimes that's not when bankers really want to talk to you. If you're thinking about getting into business and you haven't made that investment yet, certainly bankers will be very interested in talking to you and talking through lending options and financing options. But you definitely want to make sure that you're properly capitalized and have a backup plan, because not everything goes as planned, as we know, and so there's sometimes costs that pop up that you didn't think about or didn't know about, or maybe it just takes you longer in your market. It's good to have some backup options.
Is that the biggest or most common mistake you see people making, not having enough capital on hand at the beginning?
Yeah, I think that, as well as in kind of combined with that, is taking money out too soon. So instead of reinvesting to grow the business and spending money on marketing, in sales, or whatever it is that really drives the revenue side, is that people start making a little bit of money, and then they start, the first thing they do is they increase their salary. And so, certainly the franchisor would advise you against that. And good franchisors will kind of tell you what their kind of guidelines are. But, once you own the business, they can't stop you from, obviously they have usually requirements for the amount of money that you need to spend on advertising, but you can take out whatever you want for a salary, and that may put the business in jeopardy if you take out too much too soon.
How about looking at it from the other perspective, that of the franchisor? We've had a couple of people on this podcast who have at one time or another considered trying to franchise their business. I don't think any of them actually did it, but they did at least think about it. Yeah. What makes a business a good candidate to franchise?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, certainly, number one is a good, strong business model. And unfortunately, there's a lot of kind of, I don't want to say a lot, but there's some shady franchise concepts out there that, the business model never really worked all that well, and they're still franchising it, and they're not successful, and the franchisees are not successful. So
they couldn't get the model to work, so they decided to franchise it.
Yeah, exactly. But so, if you've got a good, strong business model, I mean, that's, in demand for whatever the product or the service that you offer is good. That's certainly a good starting point. I think the biggest thing to understand as a potential franchisor is you're going into a new business. So, whatever the business is, let's use the framing business, because I know that's something that your audience is very familiar with.
That's true.
When you become a franchisor in the framing business, you're no longer in the framing business, you're in the franchise business, and your franchisees are now in the framing business. So your job as the franchisor is to train, support, build the marketing and the research and the product development for your franchisees. And so, I think a lot of people get attracted to the franchise model just because they're like, oh, it's a great way and an easy way to make a lot of money.
And you can grow quickly, and somebody else is supplying the capital.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's certainly the benefit of it is, you can grow a lot faster because you're using other people's money. Um, but like I said, as the franchisor, if you're not investing in, strong operations and strong marketing programs and strong technology and all those pieces that are going to make your franchisees successful, um, the brand will, quickly implode. And we see that a lot. I mean, there's a lot of, every year there's, 300-400 emerging franchise brands that pop up, and they'll get to 10, 15, 20 units or locations open, and they'll kind of implode or hit the wall, and then a lot of people will just be like, this franchising thing is too complicated, I don't want all these people in my business, I'm going to stop franchising. And so um, it's important, I think, as a business owner, if you're thinking about franchising your business, is to understand, what it takes to be a successful franchisor. It's a big investment. I mean, just the legal, aspect of becoming a franchisor and putting together the franchise agreement and your franchise disclosure document and the marketing and support and the operations materials. I mean, it's several $100,000 just to become a franchisor, and sell your first franchise, and it will be several years before you recoup that investment back, for sure, even if you're growing at a pretty good clip.
I think that has surprised a lot of people. I mean, I think the popular imagination is that you sell a franchise, you sell 10 of them in the first year, and it's all gravy. Several $100,000. That's for just the legal work, the structure.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. No, it's not an inexpensive endeavor these days. I mean, to do it right. I mean, there's cheaper ways to kind of experiment, if you will, around it. You can, if you've got a business and you want to try, opening multiple locations. I mean, that's always the advice I give to a potential emerging franchisors. If you think your business is replicable and potentially good for franchising, why don't you as the franchisor or you as the business owner open, the first couple of units outside of your market, and prove that you can replicate it before you start, doing it with other people's money. Again, that's not always realistic for everyone, but if you've got a good business and you've got good systems, then, I think that's a great way to kind of test the waters. And a lot of good new franchise companies will do that, is they'll open 5 or 10 just as corporate stores, corporate locations, and then their first franchisees will buy those locations, over periods of time, and then and they'll grow from there.
Is it even possible to franchise if you haven't opened multiple locations and proved that it can work in more than one place?
Yeah. No, I mean, I like I said, I was just at a franchise expo this weekend, and there was several franchisors there that don't even have their first franchisee yet. And they don't even, most of them have at least a corporate business, but there's some people that start franchising with just an idea.
Wow.
They haven't opened it themselves. So
that seems scary.
Yeah. And, and I think that especially when you're talking about franchising, I mean, the idea of franchising is supposed to be you're investing in a proven business model with all these systems and operational procedures behind it. And so, when you're talking about a new emerging brand, you're not going to get the same kind of level of support and operational experience that you get with, certainly a more mature brand. And, so and that's, I think, going back to your question about how entrepreneurial is franchising. Certainly in an emerging brand, you can be a lot more entrepreneurial. If you get into a McDonald's or a Subway or something that's been around for decades and, has thousands of franchisees, they've kind of figured it out. You're going to be less entrepreneurial in those larger systems for sure.
I think one thing that stops business owners from franchising, along with the cost that you've just described and the complication, is the fear of from reading all the stories I think most of us have read about the tension that tends to arise between franchisors and franchisees. There's a lot of litigation.
Yeah.
Is that inevitable, that tension?
No. Yeah. And I mean, the thing about franchising, obviously, and you're in business, so you're talking about money. And so if you're a good franchisor and you're realistic about the financial expectations of the business, and you've got a proven system that works, and you're providing your franchisees with the support that they need, the training that they need. If you go to Franchise Business Review's website and you look at some of the brands that are on our awards list, I mean, these are brands, many of them have been around for decades, and they've never been sued by their franchisees. And so it's not inevitable for sure. Where franchisors get into trouble is, when they're kind of overselling and under delivering, and they're setting expectations of you're going to do X amount of sales, and it turns out that you're really not going to do X amount of sales, and and then the franchisee gets into trouble financially and starts when people get scared, if you're not making the money that you thought you were going to be making, that's when they start changing how they perform in the business. And so they stop investing in marketing, or they stop hiring new employees to grow, and they're just scared, and then that just kind of spirals and compounds. So it's certainly whenever you're dealing with people in business, there's potential tension, but again, if you're a fair operator, and you're setting realistic expectations with your people, and you're doing all the right things, there's a lot of great case studies of amazing brands out there that have, grown fast, grown very large, and have not had any issues with their or limited issues with their franchisees. I mean, you can argue with your franchisees about many things. I mean, it might be whether the logo should be red or whether the logo should be blue. I mean, as you grow, I mean, certainly you're going to get a lot more opinions about your business than you would as a single, business owner. But
sure,
that can also be good too, because it can help the brand, change and grow with time. I mean, that's another big component of franchising, is that, every business obviously has to evolve and change constantly. And a lot of people get into franchising and they just are like stuck on what they invested in at the time, and they don't want to reinvest. They don't want to evolve. They just want to keep doing what they were doing, and they don't want to change. And so that can be problematic for both franchisees and for franchisors that are trying to get their franchisees to, move along and grow with the system. So, but again, I think it's easy to do it right, or I should say it can be done right. It may not be easy, but
right.
It's certainly been done.
Eric, I suspect I could talk to you all day. I've really enjoyed this. Unfortunately, we're out of time. But Eric Stites is the CEO of Franchise Business Review. Thank you so much for taking the time, Eric.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And I hope some of your listeners, take franchising seriously, whether they want to be a franchisee or franchise their business and become a franchisor.
Well, if they're interested, they should check out the Franchise Business Review. Thanks again, Eric.
Thank you.
Have a great week, everyone.